Thinking Out Loud with Dave Palmer. Here on Morning Joy, where truth matters.
Welcome back to Morning Joy, where truth matters. I'm your host, Keith Downey. And what can we learn from St. Thomas Aquinas' insights on the passions of the soul this Advent and Christmas? It's a great question. That's why we have much smarter people than myself, like Dave Palmer, to help us figure this out. Good morning, Dave.
Good morning, Keith. I don't know about that, but I do have a little bit to say about the passions and emotions and all that. And, first off, Keith, have you noticed that during this time of year, let's just say the last 2 or 3 months of the year, it seems like people's emotions get ramped up and there seems to be a lot more excitement for good and for bad. And, Debbie was just talking about despair a moment ago, and I was looking at some of the comments and on the YouTube channel, and people are talking about missing their loved ones. And somebody said, "Oh, it's that time of year," and so everything kind of gets ramped up this time of year. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, and exactly what you said—the positives and also the negatives. Yeah, it's up an extra level for sure.
Yeah, and then we also, of course, even from a job standpoint, we're all talking about, well, of course, Advent is just a time of hope, and that's a passion in itself. And the Guadalupe Radio Network is preparing for our car raffle, and you've got football playoffs, and you've got all the kids who are excited for Christmas. And I mean, there's a lot going on right now, and shopping, and the pressures that we put on ourselves of doing the right thing, and the family gatherings. And so I thought this might be a good opportunity to talk about passions, which are pretty much the same thing as emotions, and what St. Thomas Aquinas had to say about them. And first of all, like, what is a passion? I mean, how does St. Thomas Aquinas define it? And he uses the root word passivity, passivity, which means, something we receive, something that happens to us. When you're passive, it means you're being acted upon in a way, because really the passions are something that happen to us, and we're not unique in that regard. It happens to our dogs and our cats, and they have passions, and angels don't. And so it tells us something about our human nature, that we do have passions, and we react to things that happen to us in our lives. And most of the time we can't control them. Absolutely can't control them happening, but we can control how we respond to them. And so I think if there's one thing that I would want to get across about the passions, is that the object of passions, good or bad, is going to be a good or an evil. All right. So it's going to be something that we're responding to positively, or something that we're responding to adversely in pretty much every case. And Thomas is going to give 11 primary passions divided into 2 categories, which I'll explain in just a minute. But if you remember when we were going back and talking about God and his attributes, the first attribute was simplicity, and then perfection. And then the third attribute of God was goodness. And so God is goodness. And so I think that the practical, lesson, if you could say, about this with the passions, is that ultimately passions are related to our final end. They're related to God, because it's something that we're responding to either as a good or as an evil. So we can see that when we have something like hope or love or desire, we could see these passions as ultimately being something that we find related to God in some way. So in that way, we can, divinize, I guess, our passions, in a sense that it's all related. And I guess that's the point, is that we can find some more meaning in the way that we're feeling towards things. All right. So like I said, there's 11 main passions that St. Thomas Aquinas talks about. And you're going to find in every case, it's either a good or an evil that it's responding to. There's one category, and I won't go into some of these are kind of fancy words, but there's something called concupiscible passions that Thomas talks about. And there's 3 pairs or couplets of concupiscible. And if I was doing Back to the Father, I'd say, okay, everybody write this down. And if they want to, they can, okay? But if you're driving, don't do that.
Please.
So the first couplet is love and hatred. Okay, that's simple enough. They're opposites, right? Yeah. The second is desire and aversion, which would mean you're kind of a little step back. You're either moving towards it or away from it. And then the third couplet is joy and sorrow. And joy and sorrow means you're resting in either the good or the evil. Okay, if you're resting in, and you've got it. I mean, it's there. It's not something you're desiring. It's there, and you're either joyful about it or you're sorrowful about it. So those are the 6 related couplets of the concupiscible passion. And as you can see, 3 of them have to do with the good, 3 of them have to do with the evil. So 3 of them have to do directly with our relationship with God. 3 of them have to do with something that would in some way turn us away from our ultimate end or God. Okay. So, and everybody has experienced all of those, sometimes in the course of a single day, you might experience every single one of those. Right.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. So then the second group is called what Thomas calls the irascible passions. And these are a little bit more complicated. They're a little bit more drawn back. He calls them, they're arduous. They're a little bit more challenging. They're not as direct. And there are also 2 pairs, hope and despair, fear and daring. And then the 5th one is anger. And he says anger has no opposite. Okay, it's the only passion of the 11 that doesn't have an opposite. And the interesting thing, like hope and despair both have the good as their object. So if there's a good that's not present with you that you desire, you're hoping for it, right? But if you have determined that you can't achieve it, then it's despair. All right. So if if the person you love marries somebody else or dates somebody else, or you can't get that perfect gift that you wanted because it's not available, you're despairing, but the object is a good. The object is something that you wanted, but you determined that you no longer can have it. So like Judas was an example of despair. He didn't think that he could ever get God's mercy, so he goes off and he kills himself, in the Bible. That would be the classic example of despair. And then fear and daring, the object is an evil. All right. So you fear something evil, like the monster in your closet, or you fear what have you, an economic downturn. Whereas daring, you run towards an evil. That's why people like to, jump out of airplanes or wrestle alligators or, do crazy stuff, watch scary movies, or some people go to haunted houses. They're running towards an evil, right? It's almost like they want to confront it. They want to face it. They want to, have some kind of an encounter with it, because they're rather running away from it. They want to run towards it. And then the last one is anger. And that's like a present evil that you got to deal with. It's there, and you're going to either, you're going to have to deal with it one way or the other. So those are the 11. And again, I think as I said those, everybody's like, okay, yeah, I've experienced that. So anyways, I'll take a pause there, take a sip of coffee. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's funny because without you and having you break it down really simply, I don't know if I would have been able to pick this up just simply by reading the Summa. I think having something like this has been really fruitful. I know for myself, but I'm sure many out there listening, because we're certainly able to pick it up, what you're putting down. And I also found that when you're talking about people despairing on running out of things, it reminds me of back in the 90s with Furby and Tickle Me Elmo, like how people were like running to these things and they were like running out of these toys to give to their children, and people were in despair. I remember that even as a child.
Yeah, you're too young to remember the Cabbage Patch dolls. I mean, that was something that anybody, my age or thereabouts remember that. Yeah, you're right. Oftentimes there's this one toy or this one thing that everybody wants, and if you can't get it, then that would ultimately be despair. But the object of it would be a good, right? Yeah. So now, interesting, Keith, and I know we don't have a lot of time left, but Thomas says, okay, well, are the passions good or evil, right? Well, historically, there have been different groups of philosophers, like the Stoics believed that, you just don't want to go express any emotions. They thought all the passions were bad. And then if in Eastern religion, like the Buddhists, they believe that nirvana is the extermination of all desire. Okay, you got to exterminate desire. That's nirvana to the Buddhists, right? But the Christian thought on it is very different than that. Is that we don't label passions as good or bad, but only to the degree that they accord with reason. So we always have to look at everything like, okay, I'm feeling sorrowful. Well, that's not good or bad, but if it takes you away from reason and you're not reasonable, or you're angry, you can have a reasonable response to anger, right? Jesus did in Scripture, and then you can also have an unreasonable response as well. And so, and one interesting thing is, he says the first of the passions is love. And love, of course, is one of those concupiscible that I mentioned, love and hatred. And all the other passions are caused by love, ultimately. So if there's one thing I leave you with, is that every single thing you do, every emotion and passion that you feel during this season, whether it's not finding that toy, or the eager anticipation of Christmas, or your football team got eliminated from the playoffs, it's all based on love. And like I said before, love is God. God is love. Scripture says that 2 times. And so I'll just leave you with that. As you're feeling all the emotions this holiday season, remember that it all ultimately leads you to God and Jesus Christ, because it's all related.
Great summary there. That's perfect. Did your team get eliminated, your football team?
I live in Dallas, Keith. I mean, come on. You're really going to go there?
Fair question. Oh, goodness. Thank you so much, Dave, for joining us this morning, as always, every Tuesday. But if you're wanting a deeper dive into this subject, make sure to check out Back to the Father. That's Fridays at 1 p.m. Central on GRN Online YouTube. And like I mentioned, you did kind of a deeper dive on this subject last Friday, right, Dave?
Yeah, because I wasn't with you last Tuesday, and we won't have a Back to the Father this Friday because I'm off. So I figured I'd do a little retro subject here.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
It's perfect. So make sure to check that out and watch it. And that is it for the end of our first hour. Thanks again, Dave. Now I understand a lot of you are going to be on your way to work, dropping your kids off at school, so on and so forth. And you might not be able to catch the second hour of Morning Joy. That's all right, because we've got you covered. You just need to check out the YouTube or even the Rumble, the site there. Just search Morning Joy Radio, and that'll come up easily. And you can stream on demand Morning Joy, as well as the other great shows like The Quest, Back to the Father, as we just mentioned. So make sure to check those out. But tomorrow morning on Morning Joy, we'll be joined by Sissel Anderson on her Fruitful Living segment. So make sure to tune into that tomorrow if you're going to be unable to catch the remainder of today's edition of Morning Joy. But we're going to take a quick little break here and continue Truth and Joy on the second hour right after this break on Morning Joy, where truth matters.
This has been Morning Joy, where truth matters, hosted by Keith Downey. Take some joy with you today. Visit grnonline.com/joy to listen again, share a segment, or answer the question of the day. That's grnonline.com/joy.